I'm just going to, there we go. The recording's in progress and people have asked for the captions. So I'm just going to put the captions and I hope people show captions. I'm hoping that that will work. Yes, I think that has been included now. And just a reminder, if you want to share any comments on social media with regards to this, it's hashtag GA Career Conversations. The format for tonight, for those who may be new to the sessions, is over the course of 90 minutes. We're taking 30 minutes to chat with our author about her career journey. We are then going to take 30 minutes where I'll ask her some questions specifically about the book, and then 30 minutes where you will all have the opportunity to ask questions of Delee. And the 90 minutes I found flies by, so bear with us, join us, have your cup of tea or your water or coffee or whatever it is that you are enjoying right now, and we'll get into things very quickly. I ask, please keep your microphones muted until the final 30 minutes. Feel free to engage in the chat if you want, but in the meantime, we will open up the microphones at the end of questions or comments for Delee or for I. For Ontario lawyers who are joining us tonight, we want to remind you that you do have your CPD hours eligible through the Law Society of Ontario. And this one's a little different. Given the content, this one's a little different. You have 1 hour of professionalism, but you also have 30 minutes of EDI professionalism content. Given the topic of the book, Gender at Work, it seems absolutely fitting. For those who have joined us before, I really hope that these conversations will allow us to learn together, to inform one another, to have open and brave conversations. And I acknowledge the work, though, of Elise Hencora, whose article reminded me that for some, brave spaces are exhausting. And so for that reason, what I'm inviting us all to do is to have an accountable space today where we all take responsibility for our actions and our comments as we move forward for the next minutes. So without further ado, I am so delighted to invite Delee Fromm to join us. And I'm going to stop sharing because you actually have her here as opposed to just our PowerPoint. We'll go back to the PowerPoint in a little bit. Delee, welcome this evening.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really love the questions about career journeys. So this has been such a fun thing to prepare for, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of fun in terms of tonight and learning all about gender at work.
So I'm going to show the book again, Understanding Gender at Work. And I don't want to lose the additional part that's after that, how to use, lose, and expose blind spots for career success. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on. So Delee, one of the things that you and I have talked about, many people that I speak to will often tell me that what they crave is learning about other people's journeys, career journeys. And so my first question for authors is always to ask them about their career story. Can you share with us briefly your personal highlights of your career journey, what you thought's been important, how and why did you start each of the different roles, because I know you share many roles that you've had, and how and when did you choose to move on? Over to you.
This was really fun for me to go back, because at my age and stage, it's sort of a long way to look back and to think about. And I'm really on my fourth career now. So let's start with the first one, which was psychology. I went into that because I followed my bliss. Joseph Campbell talks about following your bliss. And I took in high school, I'm from small town Saskatchewan, and remarkably, they had psychology. A teacher that taught psychology, and I absolutely adored it. It just seemed so natural for me. And so of course I went to university and pursued degrees in psychology. And so it was really following my bliss. I then neuropsychology was the area that I was in, and worked at a large psychiatric hospital in Alberta. And after 5 years, I was offered head of the department. I did a lot of things there. I published, I did clinical work. I did private work as well in neuropsychology. So it was fascinating and varied, but and I was doing well, obviously, to be offered head of the department. I'll just throw in a gendered aspect there. I didn't think I was ready to be a leader. Everyone around me did, but I didn't think I was. So of course I didn't accept it and went into law instead. But it was interesting that I found it too easy, even though I was doing a lot of things and it was fascinating. I thought it was too easy. So I moved on to law. I had been in the courtroom as a head injury expert. And so law sort of was attractive and looked, incredibly interesting. So that's what caused me to move on. My love of learning. And we know women generally, a lot of women have this love of lifetime learning, which puts us in very good stead for careers. Sorry, I just keep throwing in talk about myself. So
please do.
okay. So law was the next thing. And I ended up, I thought I was going to be a litigator. And of course, the way, career paths are not linear, they're sort of zigzag in there. So I ended up doing commercial real estate. I went to McCarthy Tétrault in Toronto and initially planned to do litigation, but ended up doing something totally different. Liked it, really liked it. Did that for 17 years and was not bored. It wasn't easy. It was very challenging, very challenging. So that was my second career as a lawyer for 17 years. And why I moved on was I knew there was life beyond law. I had been a psychologist, so I realized it was just, there's a joke about becoming a partner, and that is, it's like partnership is a pie eating contest. And then when you win, you get to eat more pies. That's the prize. So it was like I was constantly working, doing bigger and bigger deals. The time between them got shorter. And it just seemed like all I was doing was working. And so I thought, I'm not sure I want to keep doing this all the time. The challenge was there, intellectually stimulating, but I just wanted to do something else. And throughout all that time, I had taught the lawyers at the firm, and also when I was a first-year associate, I was asked to help with a negotiation course at Osgoode Hall Law School. I'm still actually helping teach that on a motion. So negotiation teaching, and I loved it. So again, it was follow my bliss. What did I love doing? And I actually do this in career counseling. People come and they're not sure, they're a bit dissatisfied where they are, it's not a good fit. I will say to them, create your perfect day. Create your perfect day from details. What do you want to expand? What do you want to do all the time? And it was sort of like that. Like that's what gave me juice to keep practicing commercial real estate, was teaching. And so I just thought, that's what I'm going to do. And as luck would have it, I had a childhood friend who was consulting, doing consulting work, teaching, training, coaching. So it was easy. We became a partnership. And so that sort of flowed from that. And now I've been doing that 20 years. And I usually have a 10-year pattern, but it might be 20 now, where I just, after 20 years, I'm like, okay, sort of done with that. And now I am embarking on and working diligently in terms of writing mysteries. So I'm quite enjoying that because it's so different from what I was doing. Still consulting, still coaching, but sort of blending that in. And during COVID, it was a great fun. And that was, again, I haven't moved on from that, but I've decided that it's nice to blend that in because I'm always learning. Writing fiction is not easy. It looks easy. And people who do it well make it look very easy, but it's not. So that's what I'm doing now in my spare time is writing, and I'm quite enjoying it. So that's sort of my journey. It was really follow your bliss and love of learning, which sort of got me into the 4 different areas, 4 different careers.
I love the follow your bliss, and before we get to the next question, were you? This is off the chart question, and I apologize, but were you afraid to follow your bliss, or were you excited to follow your bliss? Was there any hesitation to follow your bliss, Delee?
Thanks for that question, because it's really eagerness. For Joseph Campbell, it was follow your bliss. For me, it was follow your eagerness, and that's so no, there wasn't fear. I was supported. I'm privileged to be able to leave and go on to other careers. So that I'm very grateful for. But no, I didn't have fear. In fact, looking back, I'm surprised I didn't have more trepidation, given, not that it was bouncing, because I really only had 2 jobs before I went into consulting, right? 2 employers. So it wasn't like I was bouncing around. And now your stats, are that people will be every 2 to 3 years, every 4 to 5 years. So I sort of did a pattern that wasn't usual then, but no fear, no fear. I followed my eagerness and basically, was very rewarded for so doing. Yeah.
I love that. Follow your eagerness. That's a phrase that I don't think I've heard. In your book, you've given a number of different tests and questionnaires and guidebooks, if you will, or suggested for things to be able to plan your career in a particularly conscientious and intentional way. And I know that we both strongly encourage people to reflect and plan. But one of the questions that I also ask my guests is recognizing that sometimes serendipity or happenstance is involved. And I'm asking my guests, and so this is your turn now, how much of your career would you say was planned strategically with a lot of the questionnaires that you have or similarly thought out? And how much the chance occurrences that you recognized and pursued play a role?
So this was really fascinating for me to think about. So it's funny because yes, I absolutely, when I coach, people talk about reflection and planning, but the way I operate is it's intuition and eagerness. So it's intuition as to what I'm going to do next. It's what I feel like doing. And that surprised me because I would never classify myself as a feeler on the Myers-Briggs. I'm not a feeler, but I do that and then I plan and reflect. So it's the intuition, eagerness that got me into each of these professions, but it was planning. Once I decided to go into a profession, it was planning it out as to, where to go and how to do it well in the best way that I could. In terms of chance, I think we all do. I have to caution, and I will never say I was lucky. I was lucky. There was chances, and it's not to say that, oh yeah, it's all me. I don't mean that, but I think it's a gendered approach as well. When we've done well in a profession or done well on a project, we will say, yeah, I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky. And I think it's deferring. It's, we're going to get into promotion, but I'm very careful not to say that because I don't think I'd be a good role model to say I was lucky. Chance, absolutely. Crossing paths with people, connection, lucky connections, absolutely. But again, I really caution about I've just been lucky in my life. It just sort of all panned out. I think is deceptive. And I think it doesn't allow people to realize or to fully realize their value realistically, not in a fake way or an ego-fed way, but I think to be realistic about it. I think you're muted, Gina.
I am muted. There we go. Of course, when I least expected it. I think you're absolutely right that for many women, they talk about being lucky, and I wonder if you would classify that as a gender blind spot or an issue that comes up because they aren't. We'll talk about this later, so I won't go into right now. They're not prepared necessarily to promote themselves as much as they want to. And what I wondered from our participants now, if you want, you don't have to, how many, and Delee, maybe you can help us out with the framing the question, how different careers or different employers, and you can choose to indicate which one of you had since leaving school, and you might still be in education as we go forward, but if you can sort of share in the chat, how many different either employers or different careers perhaps have you had, just so we can get a sense of where people are at the process. I realized recently, Delee, into the book club, that when I was chatting with some people about this, I have had sort of 8 roles with 5 different employers, in about a 30-year career. And in some instances, when I thought about that, I thought, oh my gosh, how many different careers, but they were like you, every 8 to 12 years, there'd be something else happening and moving forward, building on different things. So if people want to add into the chat, I'd love to see where you're at. And what we're going to do is go forward now with the book. And Delee, again, trying to pick a couple of things to talk about in the book, it was really difficult. We're going to try and keep this to 30 minutes, and people, please have your questions available for us. I'm looking at the chat just to see if anybody has any. Nope, you haven't. That's okay. Contributed. Let's dive into it. let's start with your why. Why was this an important book for you to research, write, and share with the world? And if I can share with the group, you sort of let me know just before we went live that this was sort of a 2-year project for you. So what was your why for this book?
Well, there were 3 things I can think of. There's probably more, but 3 things I'll mention. One, when women asked me in the seminars, could I recommend a book? There were multiple books. Women Don't Ask. That was the one of them. There were some books on presence, but they didn't have everything in it, and they were just singular books. So you had one maybe on communication, one on presence. These are just for women with gendered aspects. And I found I didn't really like any of the books fully. I don't think they were that as complete. And so to have it all in one place, I thought was really good, especially since I was conducting seminars and for coaching, especially to have a book I could just pull out and say, okay, here it is, here's everything, especially with the foundational work as well, that we're going to get into in terms of what underlies these various things. So that was one reason. Second was awareness. That's another thing I found books really lacking. Having been a psychologist, I know how important it is to understand when you're building skills or planning careers is what do you bring to the table? What is it about yourself? So there's tons of questionnaires in this one. In the workbook, there's even more. So that was very important to have that awareness piece. And the third piece, as I started working on this, was I started realizing that it's really slow. Like we've been really slow in terms of gender equality. And it sort of shocked me because everyone to this day, and I wrote this a few years ago, we're saying, yes, we absolutely espouse gender equality. The research shows, of course, everybody wins when there's gender equality. So it surprised me that it was so slow. Like at that point, I think it was around 160 years. So it was just, I was thinking, why is this? And as a psychologist, I knew it had to be the unconscious coming into play. Because when people are consciously saying, yes, 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 I agree with it. Yes, 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 we have to help women. And nothing's really happening. You have to say what is really happening here. So that's why I did it, is so that I could really dig down so that everyone would understand, everyone would be aware of what these things were. And so those are the 3 basic reasons as to why I wrote this book.
And I know that we had a conversation months ago about this. While most people who will pick up this book are women, there's a lot of information here, a lot of suggestions and recommendations. And I love how at each chapter you end with, and I'm paraphrasing, but recommendations or suggestions for leaders, organizations, mentors, and champions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And this is important information for all, not just for the women in the world, but professional women, but also for the people that they work with, men and women as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we are not going to reach gender equality without men's help. And the research shows that everything gets better when you have gender equality. Mental health for men improves, for children improves. So this isn't just our goal. It has to be everybody's goal. And so absolutely it is for everybody. I'm a bit disheartened and we're, we can discuss this later, but just because a lot of men now think we've achieved it. We've achieved gender equality. So yes, this book, Gina, you're absolutely right, is really for everybody, and maybe even especially men at this stage.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me ask you, and we're going to put up a couple of slides here in a second, but unconscious bias, and it's a theme that many people talk about, or gender blind spots. They hamper us, as you've said, in our goal to achieve global gender equality, as we've talked about, but how do they impact an individual's career development in organizations? Can you spend some time taking us through that? And I'll put up some slides, and I would like people to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if I actually am sharing properly. And we're going to get to the first slide. Whoops. There we go. Is that okay? Thumbs up. Thanks, Sandra.
That's
all
perfect.
Right.
Okay, so I just wanted to, for everybody here, so to understand when I get into different types of career skills, and perhaps you've already looked at this in chapter 1, these are the gender, culture, behaviors, lessons that we learn as children and forget as adults. We've forgotten that these are the lessons we learn. Not all women, not all men, let's be clear about this. We're diverse and complex. I had a masculine mother, so I tend to, follow more of the rules on the masculine side of things. But despite that, we still live in a society that knows what the feminine rules are and the masculine rules. And so as a result of that, even if we do have masculine mothers, we still need to know all of the different rules. So not all men, not all women, and these are also related to countries. So in international negotiation, I teach negotiation, and that's where I really started out as a lawyer teaching. The masculine and feminine cultures are also a scale when you're looking to negotiate internationally. So there are some countries that are very feminine based, and there's others that are more masculine based. So it's broader than just male and female, of course. So for males, what they're taught as children is to be an individual. That's very important. To stand out is paramount. Status is important. Achievement is very important. And power is a ladder. It's one up, one down. And if you're not one up, you're one down. Sort of like who's who in the zoo. And for females, the most important thing is group. It's fitting in. And the reason I take time to go through these carefully is because these all inform our skill development and whether we develop certain skills to a certain degree or whether we stop ourselves, whether there's personal injunctions. So fit in, relationship is key. Harmony is very important. We seek harmony, and power is equal. So it's a ritual. It's a theory. It's not that we maybe believe that we're all equal, but it's certainly how we operate. And I always use the example, or one of the examples I use is, if you were in middle school and you said to someone, I've got an A and I see you've got a C, I am so much better than you. That would be it for birthday parties for like ever. You would never be invited to a birthday party ever. You would be ostracized because you were going one up. For boys, that's automatic. It's one up or one down. And so that's very important to understand as we go through the skill development. And why it's also important. If I could have the next slide, Gina, please.
Can but I just want to confirm for a second, Delee, there's no right or wrong, correct or incorrect, right? I just want to clarify that for the group, that's what I got out of your book, that there's one is not better or worse or right or wrong. It's all just a matter of social behaviors, right? I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, and there's nothing right or wrong. No. It's just how it makes it easier. It's almost like a shorthand. So we go into a situation, it's like any other cultural behaviors. And anthropologists, by the way, call this, gender culture, is when we go in, we know how to act. We know automatically what the rules are, although we've forgotten them, but we know what is acceptable and is not acceptable in a group. The reason this becomes important is if we're always with women who've been trained this way, then it doesn't become an issue. I mean, I'm gross generalizations, but where it becomes an issue, and this is what, I teach at Rotman, we can go to the next one, the unwritten rules. And this is for immigrants as well, because I've taught negotiation to immigrants. These unwritten rules are very important because if they come from a feminine culture, they don't know these. And so the one I want to really stress, so get to know the workplace obvious, gain insider status, increase your visibility. So I've had people come up from South Asia. They don't, we're very masculine in North America in terms of our culture. So they don't understand this. And just like women, they will sit in their offices and do really, really good work and think they become visible to the organization that way. And that is a myth. And more, and it's so great to see male mentors are telling females that they are mentoring to increase their visibility. Go and talk to so-and-so. Make sure they know you've done this project, because we tend not to, because we don't like to promote. We don't like to brag. We don't like to be one up, but we need to do it because that's an unwritten rule. So in organizations, most of the rules are masculine. And if we've been raised in a feminine culture, we don't know the rules. They're invisible to us. And we just continue on with our own rules that sometimes don't work as well, and oftentimes don't work as well. The other thing is to build strategic relationships, but because we're all about relationships and equality, everybody's equal, not so much on the strategic. So we tend not to like politics. We tend to hate the word. I had to change the name of my seminars from politics to social intelligence because the women who were hiring me to do the work did not like the word politics. But I pointed out because it's important to know. Men do it automatically when they get in. Most men.
I love that you changed the word, by the way, because that word politics sometimes just completely shocks people. And when I saw that reference to very intentionally changing the language, I thought, yeah, it makes sense when you see it, because people just have this reaction to it.
It is. It's same as bragging, braggalicious. I called the seminars and no one wanted that either. So the next one, and it was interesting, because that's what you're trying to teach. And so I thought, oh, no, we're changing the name of the seminar. No problem. We're changing it. I just wanted people to be open to it. And so in the next slide, you'll see, and I think yes. So I've got 6 in the book, but I'm just keeping it simple here. I'm not getting into common bias because maybe you have wine at home. I don't know. I just thought you need wine. You need some alcohol if we get into all 6. So the self-limiting mindsets is all about us stopping ourselves. Injunctions. So I don't want to promote myself because that's braggy. People, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. And we think it's judgment, but it's basically socialization we've now forgotten about. I'm not a leader. I don't feel like a leader. Self-limiting mindsets. Misreading gender habits. So imagine masculine lenses watching someone who's been trained in the feminine culture, who defers, who's all about harmony, who doesn't stand out, who, is all about relationships. They are judged as not being very confident and not being very competent. So that's the misreading of gender habits. It happens in hiring. And because of the work I've done with women, they now correct their male counterparts to say, no, that woman is asking a lot of questions because she's establishing relationship. Just look at her CV. She's heads above everybody else here. So that's the sort of thing that happens. And then gendered expectations. Now that we're into March Madness with basketball, I'll tell you, it affects men and women. I mean, the patriarchy has not been fair to anybody. But males will not do the grandma throw for foul shots, the basket, the penalty shots. They will not do the grandma throw, which is the ball between the legs. Mm-hmm. The high percentage, it's far more accurate. And remember, these guys get paid. This is college stuff, March Madness, but the professionals get paid based on their scoring, and they will not do it. They will not use it because of how it looks. It's called the granny shot. So gendered expectations, it's riddled throughout the book. It is amazing because we're social creatures, how impacted we are by what others, expect of us in terms of our behavior. So there we are in terms of 3 of them. Very powerful, these unconscious gender biases and blind spots, for sure.
And Delee, I really loved how you gave the examples. And I remember reading and sort of chuckling when I thought about the granny throw, if you will, and why not use it? Of course, why not use it? And what's come to mind as we're going through this, as you're describing it, as I was reading in the book, it's not necessarily about women changing the way that they appear in the world. They may, it's better to know it, but it's also about educating men about, sort of, as you said, the colleague who says to the male colleague, oh, no, that's not what's happening, what you might be reading, it's something else. So it's a bit of a combination of both, not changing everything that you do, but at least understanding the roadmap that's ahead of you.
That's exactly it. So I've got 4 career strategies. The first one is go along to get along, because when you're junior, I think it's a little hard to disrupt. The last one is disrupt. The last one is pretend there's no gender rules, right? And that's what heartens me about all of the gender discussion and the non-binary. the gender fluidity, I'm delighted, because I hope one day, if I live long enough, someone will be saying, so what is this masculine stuff, and what is these feminine stuff, and what are these behaviors, and why do people follow them, and so that sort of thing. I am just thrilled that we're busting through all of that stuff. But yes, you have to be aware, and I never would say put yourself in a box, or you have to stay in a box. But unless you're aware and you are in an organization, to advance, you have to be aware of what's going on around you. And I know the women I've coached, executives even, this was big, like light bulbs going off in their mind as to certain behaviors that they had experienced. Males being surprised they didn't talk about the perks that their boss just gave them, like the boss being disappointed visibly, and they're not understanding that. But the boss expected them to go out and brag about it, but they had an all-male team, so there's no way they were going to start talking about how close their car was now to the elevators. It just wasn't going to happen. So but it's that understanding so that you can navigate more easily. For sure. Or you know what, you disrupt. You can see it and you just disrupt it. Yeah.
Or disrupt. Some are disruptors and others will navigate. And I think that's sort of a solution. You talk about the information that's really impactful. And for me, and I'm just pulling up the book for that page, but in chapter 4, I read it and I kept coming back to that one page or one paragraph or part of a paragraph where you talk about negotiating that first salary, that many women don't know that they can, or that they know how to. And I thought, okay, what's the big deal? And then you put a numeric, a dollar figure to it. And you say, and I'm going to just read this out loud, over a lifetime, a small beginning of a career today can result in lost wages in excess of $1.5 million. And truthfully, I had to go back and count my zeros. I thought, no, that's not the amount, $1.5 million. And and that with compound interest, increases and raises, 35 years later, you'll have to work 8 years longer than your male, the same amount of money at retirement. That was astounding. And again, I read through the book and I kept coming back to that. You remind us that there are, of course, certainly systemic reasons for the gender pay gap. And as we've talked about, you talked about leaders, mentors, and organizations and what they can do. Can you tell us, though, about the gender triggers around this situation, around negotiating, some tips that women can learn to negotiate for themselves? And as you correctly pointed out, not just for salaries, but for projects or for resources or for other things. So let me ask you just to elaborate on that. I don't know if anybody else found that astounding, but when I saw that number, I just had to come back to it. So.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. So I'm going to deal directly with your question and then sort of go off on some paths in terms of negotiation and women. So yes, $10,000 in the first position, that will lead you to, and in fact, it's been estimated to be larger even, with promotions and in percentage increases and all of that. So definitely we're at a handicap. And the reason for this comes out because of gender triggers that they've discovered through research. So when I started teaching at York University, I looked at gender right away in personality. So there are differences in personality approaches in terms of how you negotiate. But for gender, there was nothing because they were looking at female lawyers. So I just thought, oh, gender doesn't matter. Then in 2003, a book came out that Women Don't Ask. And the gender triggers are these. So they can predict differences in negotiation success or results between males or females based on certain situations. So they can tell who's going to do better, males or females, women or men, based upon the situation. So in ambiguous situations, women don't ask. They're not, if they're not sure they can negotiate, they won't. They will take what is offered. Again, that is socialization. In coaching, and I give an example right up front in the book. One of the earliest coaching clients I had from the US. She went in and didn't ask for anything, just took what was given, and then ended up in a very bad situation, and then was basically told she should use more initiative after that. But we expect people to be fair. She said this. She said, I expected the organization to be fair to me. I expected my boss to be fair to me. So I would just take what was given. And so that tends to be, again, a gendered perspective. So in ambiguous situations, we will not negotiate. We don't think that we should negotiate. We don't know whether we should negotiate. However, if we do know that we can negotiate, there are no differences in the outcome. I should preface this all with women are great negotiators. We are great negotiators. And where our negotiation mojo comes in is negotiating for others. We negotiate far better for others than men do. 18% is one of the figures bandied around. And so when I was teaching at Osgood, I had one of the other faculty was an executive at an aeronautics company. So I talked about gender, of course. And a light bulb went on for him. And he talked to me later and he said, we could not understand. There's one female manager at the plant, one. And everyone, of course, had a team. They negotiated. Each manager negotiated for their team, their salary, plus the manager negotiated for themselves. They could not figure out why this woman had the lowest salary of all the managers, but her team had the highest salary of all the teams. So the men could not figure out what was going on because she was such a great negotiator. But what happened with her salary? What was going on? So as soon as I talked about this, we negotiate really well for others as a gendered aspect, a gendered trigger. Yeah, he got it. He's like, oh, okay, now I understand. And that's what you want to do. When you go into a negotiation, think of all the other people that benefit. The other thing that is not a trigger, but is really good to know is that collaborative, which is the most sophisticated and effective type of negotiation, something that I train lawyers at large law firms on for 2 days. Because it's such a good strategy, is a natural fit for women. So, in terms of negotiation, we are great negotiators. It's just that we've had to do it backward and in heels because of gendered expectations, because of gender training. So no, we're good. We're really good negotiators. It's just we either don't think we have permission to do it, or we feel we're going to hurt the relationship if we do it, if we ask, if we push back. So, we're really good at it. It's just knowing and understanding the situation and when to ask. And I will throw this out as a final thing. There's scripts and everything in the ask chapter on salary negotiations. But it's really important in negotiations to be aware of when those things are coming forward and maybe to call it, to say that, I am using competitive strategy or whatever. I mean, to show you the skills that I've got. And this is what you will get if you hire me. In terms of salary negotiations, hiring managers expect you to negotiate. And think if you don't, then, if this is holding you back, I shouldn't, they are going to be viewing you in a certain way if you just take what is given. So I hope that goes, that helps you to push against that injunction to think, well, how am I going to be viewed if I just go in and just say, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fine. I'll take that. When they know that there's money on the table that you were leaving there.
And Delee, I was thinking about that as I was reading that chapter, that if you said that there's always room for negotiation, but if for whatever reason an employer really is this is all I have to offer, for whatever reason, whether it's a public company, a private company that just has a certain salary and they are open and say, this is what I would have for everybody. At least they know that you're willing to ask, right? It's not a downside to make the ask.
No, absolutely. And again, I think now, I think they expect you to make the ask. And if it doesn't work out, if they say, can you, if you're asking, you can do it in various ways. Is this all you can pay? Is this the range? And gathering information, if they say yes, then you will know in 6 months' time or a year that you will be asking for more because you have asked. And the thing that's so important is to do your research. One of the other things which we talked about earlier, Gina, is aspirations, that men tend to be 30% more confident. So it's really important to do your research, to know what you want going in, be knowledgeable, know if that's not your range. And maybe then you want to consider, there's a lot of factors in getting a new job. Is this a place for you if they're willing to so underpay you? The other thing for women is a tactic. The best female negotiators I've seen at the firm I worked was the iron fist and the velvet glove. Nicest people in the world. Very pleasant. And they were pleasant. It wasn't a facade, I don't think. So they were very pleasant, but they got exactly what they wanted. They held firm on those things that were important. And so I think that's important when you go in. If you've done your research and this is the range and this is what you should be earning, because I've heard horror stories about women being underpaid. If that's what the research said you should be making, then be firm about it. Be very pleasant. It doesn't mean you have to be, you know, what's the word? Grumpy is coming to mind, but that's not it either. You don't have to be a barracuda. You can be very pleasant. You can be very cooperative. But on that point, you are holding firm. And again, you know, you are negotiating your image. The two things you negotiate always, and people only look at results and outcome. It's you're negotiating the relationship when you negotiate. So think about how you're going to be viewed if you are going to accept far less than, you know, research tells you is a fair wage.
And I really liked the reminder, and it comes at not just your first salary, but at subsequent salaries as well. But it's also applicable to not just salaries, right? You remind us that it comes up when we're negotiating projects or assignments or resources. To at least make the ask, but have your research. You know, we can't just pulling it out of the sky. There has to be some foundation basis for it.
Absolutely, because you know, we don't understand. I've talked to some supervisors, bosses, in law particularly, because that's the area I'm most familiar with. And you know, you'd be surprised. You know, women think the work will come to them if they do a good job on things, and there is work that comes to you that way. But you don't know behind the scenes what is being asked by the men, how they come and ask, how they make sure everyone knows what they're doing. So I think it's important that you be aware that, you know, you may think because of gender training, there's a certain thing that is done. And in fact, that's not the case. You know, people are asking for work. People are asking for, you know, the sexy work, the high profile work. So be aware of that. I just want to throw something else out though, and I think it's important to be aware of it. Not only are we great negotiators, but, you know, the gender wage gap is not on us. That's systemic. That is systemic. It is across all professions. It's getting a little crazy now, given where we are and given all the research. It's now getting, for me, very frustrating to see these huge differences. You know, the latest thing was on GPs, surgeons for sure. You know, huge differences, like 20% less per hour. I mean, you know, not just nickels and dimes, we're talking a large amount of money. So it's getting discouraging. It is systemic. So it's really important that you bring your A game to a negotiation session like this and be aware of what can be happening, because, you know, they're blind spots. They're blind spots, called that for a reason. People are blind to them. And hopefully if you're aware of them, you can maybe make it obvious or avoid them, avoid the shoals, but also make other people aware of them.
Yeah, and as you were mentioning some of the examples, my thought went to some women who are on this call. Initially, I thought, oh, and there's so many, because I've worked with internationally trained lawyers for so many years, as you know, and male and female, culturally, sometimes there are blind spots to negotiations, and whether it's to asking for salary or projects. You have to ask if boss knows that I'm good, they'll just give me the work. And then I thought, oh boy, is that a double whammy then for the women who are internationally trained or who are, you know, from different cultures, that they've got the gender blind spots, then they also have the cultural blind spots. Yes, it can happen to men and women, but boy, there are two things happening sometimes for a number of people, right?
Three sometimes, because I see some nodding there. It's very, you get it. Canadian, we're very self-effacing, humble. We're not sticking our necks out. So there's that. I understand in Japan, there's a saying that the tallest nail gets the biggest whack. So for the people I've coached that are Japanese, that comes into play, or Asian. So you've got that going on. And then we also have our feminine gender culture training. So you know, so there's all of these things going on, but it is changing. I'll tell you just a quick story that comes to mind with that is someone came to me after a seminar, a very petite Asian woman, and she said, it's so interesting how you talk about, you know, the idea, you know, of people automatically assuming roles. She said, I was in a meeting, she said, and I'm the boss. And I would have never, I was flabbergasted. She was the boss. And she said, so all these lawyers came in and they were talking to somebody else, talking as if they were and ignoring me. And she said, to see, the shock in their face when they finally realized that it was me. So I think, with women advancing, and again, it's way too slow, but I think things, those sorts of things hopefully will start eroding this idea of stereotypes and positional bias and all of those different things that we are subject to and still arise, but hopefully we're eroding them.
Hopefully. We're going to start taking questions in about 14 minutes or so, just so people have some time to think through their questions, but a couple more that we have on the board for now. One is with regards to promotion. We've sort of talked about it a little bit, but many women that I've spoken with, that I've coached, my students, have said that they don't like to self-promote or to network. And really there's two things, self-promote and network. What's the biggest takeaway? And I know I put you on the spot. What's the biggest takeaway? There's so much in that one chapter, but if there's one or a couple of takeaways, what would you say?
Well, there's so much even just on networking, because that's like an 8-hour, I've done 8-hour, programs on that. So there's a lot. So I'm just going to give you the highlights because that's what you've asked for. Firstly, you mentioned a book to me. So I'm just going back. There's books coming out on bragging and bragging rights. It's called Bragalicious is what I called it. Toot Your Own Horn was from 20 years ago. So this has been going on for 20 years. Excellent book, 20 years old on this. So, there's nothing new under the sun. What I talk about is having your foot on the brake as your foot on the gas and the brake because of personal injunctions. You don't want to brag. So imagine how your promotion is going. If you're thinking, I shouldn't really be talking about myself. Oh, what should I say? I really shouldn't. I will just ask questions and no one will know who I am at the end of the evening, right? But they will like me. So those are some of the things that I point out that there may be flaws. So if you really hate it, take a brag buddy. I just love this to have someone along with me who is going to talk me up and I talk them up. So that's a real quick tip for that. Introverts, charge up before you go. Do not go exhausted to a networking event. I know during COVID that wasn't, we didn't really need to deal with that. But before that, when I was doing networking sessions, that came up a lot. And so one person suggested, and I love it, go to the bathroom if you're an introvert. Just put on your makeup by yourself in the bathroom. You will restore by being by yourself. Your energy will build up. Because what you don't want to do, and you look good at the end. She said, and you look good with your makeup if you're you've done it. So yay, thumbs up on both of those. If you go with your energy and you're depleted, it will be obvious. And do you want to meet people who are tired? Do you want to meet people who would rather be anywhere else than talking to you? That energy, even if you try and hide it, is going to leak through. So be rested. If you really don't like it, put a deadline on it. Put a deadline. I'm going to leave in an hour. Don't go hang out by the bar or don't take calls in the hallway because again, how does that look? And are you really networking? So, there are ways around this. And so make sure that you do it. Make sure people know what you do. And I've got the whole chapter on promotes about knowing your value, knowing what you love, knowing how to tell people who don't understand your business at all what you do. And give it with an enthusiastic energy, not the standard badge. My name is, I work at so-and-so and I do something law. I was bored saying it to people and they must have been equally bored hearing it. So, think of something maybe fun to say. I solve my clients' problems. It's like, well, hearing all this boring badge talk, you're like, what? What do you, well, get them to ask questions, get them curious. They're going to remember you. And you don't have to, plumb the depths. You just have to make them remember you. So they know what you do. When they leave that place, they know you and what you do. And you know what they do and you've connected with them. So there's lots of tips in the promote. So it's a big area and I know a lot of people who don't like to network. So also be aware of that. You're not alone. Chances are almost everybody you talk to is also feeling trepidation. So that should hopefully make you feel better about it. I hope it does anyway.
And I'd love to have comments because I know we've talked about networking in a couple of the past sessions, but, have people done something unique or unexpected that they wouldn't have done previously in the last couple of months. I'm just curious if anybody has any experiences that they're willing to share, please do so. But I really liked, and I think it was in the promotions, I had a tag, know your value, and the questions that you ask for people to be able to sort of think about that ahead of time. You know, it doesn't just happen. There's preparation that comes with it, and thinking about it. And it goes back to the very first question about, or the second question on, there is some planning that comes with it. It just doesn't happen. There's some reflection and some anticipation and planning as you move forward, and really doing some self-thinking, self-reflection on what you bring to the world that is different. So if anybody's done something recently that they want to sort of give a shout out to, we'd love to hear. Promote yourself in the chat. We'd love to hear it, because I know there's some fabulous activities that people are doing. And I'll take Delee to, I think, one or two more questions before we
could I just as you talk, I'm thinking of other stuff too. One thing that I encourage people to do, and they absolutely loved it and they've done it, is firstly, you know, we're in the virtual world still, so you may want to get on early so you can actually talk to people. And when people ask you, now we're into hallways or offices or even on Zoom, what's new? You know, often we have a standard answer like, you know, the same old, or whatever it is, what's up? And you think about answering that. Think about something you're working on. Because think about how you appear to them. So if you say same old, or, you know, nothing much, it's instead of saying, you know, I'm working on this really interesting file. There's an issue with a guarantee. And so I'm doing all this really fascinating research about, you know, etc. And I've told people to prepare that on a Monday. So if they meet someone an influential other, who you want to develop a strategic relationship with, or at least have them know that you exist, think about the difference, how they're going to think about you. You're going to appear keen, you're going to appear interested, and they now know something about what you're doing. So think about that. Think about, and you will know when someone just says, how are you doing, or what's up, and all they want to hear is same old, you'll know it. But sometimes it's good to go a little deeper with that greeting.
There we go. I really love the fact that you gave the suggestion to think about it for Monday, because you might have different meetings or encounters over the week. So actually thinking about how to answer that question gets you ready for those future encounters. And I just want to do a shout out to Sandra for her podcast, to Yonita for launching your website and finishing a book. Way to go. I remember you talking about that, Yonita, a while ago. So kudos to you. That's great to see. Looking forward to seeing it and reading it. A couple more questions then for you, Delee. The chapter on politics. And again, as I mentioned, I love that you reframed it as social intelligence. There's so much around the need to reframe, or the choice to reframe. It offers an exercise, and you discuss being authentic and knowing your values. And you provide 2 pages of some suggested career values and an exercise to help identify this. Why is this important?
Oh, it's important in so many ways. Firstly, the self-awareness piece, so that you understand, because oftentimes we discover ourselves, right? Jung said that we discover ourselves as we age. We don't really know ourselves initially, but it will help you understand what you're eager to do. So what is important to you, what you value. I find it particularly helpful, not only in choosing positions, but usually people they're not aware of it at that early stage in their careers. But if something's not working, something doesn't fit, the person's dissatisfied and they know they want to change, but they're not sure why it is. It can help you pinpoint, is it the type of work you're doing that is not fulfilling? So you like intellectually stimulating and all you're doing is boring, repetitious things. So, you know, that's one way of looking at it. The other thing is the cultural fit. You know, if it's an organization that doesn't value authenticity or doesn't value, you know, intellectual stimulation, being, you know, academic, if they don't value that, you may find that, and you're not sure why, you just don't fit. It's just not comfortable for you. And there can be lots of reasons for that, but that's one way of actually diagnosing the problem. If the career just doesn't seem to be fitting. But that self-knowledge, I think, is really important, because, as I said, I've always navigated with the intuition of what do I think I want to do? What am I eager to do? What sounds like fun? And so I've done it intuitively, but to actually have a checklist that says, oh yeah, this is why. This is why I've always loved doing this, or I've always enjoyed, you know, these sorts of activities. That's why. That's
I
why.
love that. You know, it's one thing to do it intuitively, and then to do it strategically or thoughtfully, I think is really important. Delee, so you talk about the slow pace of change, and
No.
you know, how long, where we are and where we have come from and where we're going. And I think you said that the estimate for reaching global gender equality has more than doubled since you wrote the book. Is that disheartening to you, or how would you phrase your experience of it, or your thinking about it?
Yeah, it's disappointing. I won't say depressing. It's just disappointing. I mean, it means my book is more important than ever, because obviously, no, it hasn't sunk in. No, I think you have to put it in context. I mean, it is discouraging, but progress is never, a straight arrow. Obama said that. It's President Obama talked about that when he had setbacks, and it's absolutely true. So there's that. You have to put it in context. We live in Canada, one of the best countries in terms of gender equality. Every place, obviously room for improvement, but I've talked to American professors who come up from Harvard and mention you're Canadian, and they just absolutely love the idea that we have the society that we do. So I put that all in context. And the other thing that heartens me is to see the young women that I taught this to 10 years ago, who are carrying the torch, who are doing this type of work, who are getting out there. And these are working lawyers. These are not people who are consultants. They're actually getting on committees, and they're talking on panels, and they're spreading the word about this. So those are all the things that make me, really feel glad about this. As I said, I think we have to tell men that we haven't achieved equity. For those that do think that we have, I think there's still a lot of teaching that we have to do. There's some women too that that may think we've achieved it as well and aren't as helpful as they could be. But having said all that, I still am very heartened by all of it. I think that we live in a great society, and I see a lot of young women who are taking up the torch, and it just does my heart good to see that. So there's my answer. I'm moving from 163 years to 300 years. So
Absolutely. No,
without getting terribly depressing.
We've got one more question, and then we're going to open it up to some questions. And I see a couple already popping up, but I do want to do a shout out to Nikane, and if I'm mispronouncing your name, my sincere apologies, who under the promotion, she's indicated, I'm on my last lap of the NCAA process to get my law degree accredited in Canada, and I'm working on my immigration consultant website. Way to go. Congratulations to you. Keep going. That is really wonderful. So Delee, you say at the end of the book that by sharing with the reader how to play a role in creating change, what would you talk about those 6 suggestions? And I think we may have a slide just to give us a little bit of context.
Yeah, these are the 6 things. Be the change maker, be the change that you want to see. It's very important to do that. And so it's the next one, I believe. Good.
Oh,
yes. So be change. Yeah, this is it. This is it. Be a change maker. So be part of the change. And this is become influential, become political, and share your ideas. Find other influential people. Start to grassroots. That's using the power of alliances. And there's a really interesting article I read that I know you've read, Gina, as well, on LinkedIn, by a daughter of one of the people who works at Lakes. And it was wonderful, which is, strength is a team sport of women. And the power of alliances, I mean, that's the power of the collective for change, for support and for change, is to build up that alliance and use it. So you can challenge unfair tactics and gender bias when you see it. So once you're aware, you can start using these mechanisms to start whittling away at systemic bias. Know that everyone benefits. I've dropped that in about mental health. It helps men, it helps children when there is gender equality. It isn't like just we're carving up a pie. That's a negotiation, right? The fixed pie idea. It doesn't have to be competitive. We're not, cutting up a pie. We are actually adding pastries. We're being collaborative. And it's a win-win situation when we do that. So sorry, it must be around that time. I'm thinking desserts. Gender roles evolve. I mean, I love it. I said that already. I love the idea that we are questioning this whole idea of the little, pink box and the little blue box, then you have to be one and the other. It hurts everybody to have to fit within a prescribed box that we can't be authentic. And so I think it's great that that's happening. I just absolutely adore the way things are going right now. And tap into your power. Be aware that you have power. I think a lot of times we give it away as women because of wanting relationships, because of wanting harmony, because of wanting to fit in, and we don't realize our own power. So, those are the messages I would give to each of you in that regard, in terms of being a part of the change.
And those are really powerful messages. And in fact, the third one that you've got bold, even in the slide, use the power of alliances. There's a question, and I'm going to stop sharing here, and we're going to open it up. And let me just see if Rosa, would you want to either share, come off mute, show on this on video, and ask your question, because I think it talks about the power of alliances that you were just talking about. So Rosa, I know you had the question, or you want to put it in the chat. Either one is fine. I'm just going to open it up to Rosa first.
Yeah, so I have been practicing for 20 years, and one thing that I have encountered, and I'm curious if others have, is that women tend to actually be less of an ally than men in some circumstances, where they fail to lift other women up.
Yeah.
And why does that trend, it still exists today? I mean, I had a situation early on in my career where I had spearheaded leading the launch of a national practice group, and a woman sat 2 doors down from me, had just become a partner, said, oh, and this wasn't being polite. The tone was clearly someone who was not supportive. And she had said to me, well, why don't you now shoot for managing partner, in this snarky tone? And I never forgot that. I thought to myself, here I am, I'm a junior lawyer. You just became partner. I would think that you would want to be working with ambitious women and young lawyers. I vowed never ever to do that to another lawyer, male, female, or otherwise, but it felt horrible. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that topic of women failing to be allies for other women.
Yeah, it's disappointing, isn't it, when you think about it, because we are a collective. Firstly, I think some of the reason they're called queen bees, right? So they see limited opportunities. They see as only so many places for women, and they see, whether they consciously or unconsciously, see you as competition. So if you're doing things, they may be reacting to that because they're fearful. And so, that's me being generous. I don't understand it, because, as I said, we all win when we help each other. And I don't think anyone's penalized. I mean, the research shows that men get a lot more credit when they help women, than women helping women. They get a lot more credit in the organization, but it still doesn't mean you're going to be penalized as a woman if you're helping. So I don't understand it on any basis. The other reason I've given in the past, and I'm hoping this is changing, is my generation. I mean, we had to be tougher than nails. And the women that I saw as partners when I came into the firm, OMG, there were a few exceptions, but some of them, especially in corporate, they were like really tough. And they had reputations for that. And I don't know if they had to prove themselves, that they had to be more masculine than men to get ahead. I don't know. But that's part of it. That I saw as part of it, is they definitely were not nurturing. You really had to get out of their way. So, those are the reasons. But I will never understand it personally, because there's no practical reason for it. There's no reality to it. For being that way. And if anything, it's going to help you immensely to help other women.
Delee, I'm just curious, and Rosa, thank you for sharing that example in particular, but if it happens to somebody else, whether it's a junior lawyer or even a more senior professional, how to respond to it. Yeah, and Rose, I'm not going to put you on the spot to say how did you respond to it, because you're a junior lawyer and a senior lawyer is making these comments to you. How would you? I see her smiling, right? Like, how do you respond to it, Delee? And Rosa, if you want to share, fine. But if not, Delee, I'm just curious if you have any suggestions.
So I had some stuff about exposing, right, in the book, about calling it.
Yes.
And again, as a junior, you have to be careful, and humor can really backfire. But I mean, and the power of the alliance, right? So there's my mind is going all different directions in terms of things that you can do. One thing you could do, which is not political, is to say, well, that's really supportive of women. That's thank you for that. Calling it. You were saying to her, that's really not acceptable. That is, I would never recommend that unless the person who's going to do it really feels strongly about it and thinks they can do it. The other thing is power of alliances, where you're able to share that with others, and then politically that person gets tagged. So in the end, that's a political strategic move you can make, which is you have enough people supporting you, they know what she's like, right? So that it's not hidden any longer. You can question it. That's always a wonderful way. It's a little bit passive aggressive, can get that way, but if you're curious, so that's an interesting comment. I'm not understanding it. Get them to explain it, put it on them. And so, one of the things I teach about bias is how to disrupt it, and that is there are 20%. So this is in a different situation. If there were people with you, Rosa, and I'm sorry, I like the question. I'm sort of going off a bit, but I think it's helpful. If you were standing with a group of women and she said that, so 20% are going to be with her. This is based on average. 20% are going to be with you, and there's 60% in the middle that are just the silent minority, or the majority, silent majority. You want to make a comment because you want to show those people. And again, if you're junior, it's a little bit iffy, but if you feel secure enough, you want to show them that you're not accepting that comment and you're calling it. And you could with a question quite easily. People will pick that. They already know that they'll pick it up and they'll realize you're not accepting it. You're not allowing it. You were questioning it, and you don't have to get hostile, because people change just through that way of calling it. You don't have to be hostile. You don't have to push back. You just have to call it in a way that people recognize that you are not accepting it. Is that helpful, Rosa?
It is. And if I could be vulnerable for a moment, I'll tell you exactly what I did do. I actually went into my office and cried. I did not feel like I was in the power position. It left me traumatized. And even now when I talk about it, I tear up.
Because you're trying your darndest, and basically someone is saying, well, you're really not, you're not worth it in my estimate. I mean, that is trauma. That is trauma. And so the power of alliances, if you could have built up, imagine this, Rosa, and in the times you're talking about, it would have been difficult, but if you had a group that knew, that were with you and understood this stuff, and you went in and said, guess what she just said to me, and they were able to comfort you. And the next time, if she was in a group, because she's a bully, and bullies will do this, and they love groups because that's where they can really shine. If she had said something even possibly remotely like that, then one of you might have been brave enough just to call it and shut her down or question it, so that everybody, the power of alliances, where we all know there's that partner who really doesn't get it, who isn't on our side. And then other people get that that's what she's like. So you can see the power of alliances. It gives you, I think it takes away that vulnerability, because you're not alone. You're part of a collective. And, it gives you, I think, that comfort as well, the force to change, and also the comfort in the moment.
Yeah. And Rosa, thank you. And I agree with Sandra's sort of heart, because that is a situation that is difficult at that time. And moving forward, I think your experience, though, has emphasized your response, should that happen again, in a very powerful, meaningful, impactful way. So, while I would never hope for that kind of a reaction, it was sort of that maybe impetus to to deal with it differently. And you would have probably dealt with it differently in any event. So thank you for that.
And
Joanna,
also
what
it made you, can I just, and also Rosa, it made you a role model. You said, I will never. She showed you in a very negative way what you would never do.
No,
And so the silver lining, unfortunately, it's not a big silver lining, but it's a silver lining. It made you a different person.
It did. I mean, this was almost 18 years ago. So I was, and it still affects me today. I would never want anyone, like I said, male, female, or otherwise entering the profession to ever have an encounter like that, because it does leave a mark. And at that age, and even now, like women tend to suffer from imposter syndrome. That's not the kind of encounter that anyone needs. So, but anyhow, thank you for giving me the floor.
Appreciate it. Thank you,
and
Rose.
thank you for being brave and sharing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Joanna, I see your hand up. Welcome. I think it's the first time that we're seeing you to this book club. So good to see you. You've got the floor.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Sorry I was late. It's such a good group, and Delee, I've seen you before. I think I saw you at the start of my career 12 years ago at a firm event. And I remember that you were awesome. So when I saw this today, I thought I wanted to hear what you had to say. To echo something that Rosa said is I thought, I mean, I've seen and observed myself some of the comments that I've heard, and sometimes women that I expected to be allies weren't, and I felt similarly that I wanted to be different. So I've also been working I've been a lawyer for 12 years now, but I had a career before that as a law clerk and investigator, so related roles. And I've seen trends. So one of the trends that I've seen, this is where my question's going, is I'm seeing things slide backwards. Like about 5, 10 years ago, I think I had more male allies. And what I'm kind of seeing now is like really disheartening, and I'm hearing it from others, is, for instance, women who want to have a family. I thought we'd sort of gotten over them being offered fewer opportunities. But if someone announces that they're expecting, you still see like the eye rolls, and then it was like, well, get her off the file, or don't give her work. And and I'm like, I can't believe that. But I was just wondering, the other thing I'm seeing from men in particular is they use that excuse, like people having a family, I think, to take opportunities away from people, or to parcel them out differently, or it's not seen as a positive, even though they have wives, and they're staying at home. So the other thing I'm seeing also is watch out for her, or watch out for those two, as in they're going to make a complaint about lack of representation, or in executive positions and things like that, which I thought was like, wow, now we're really sliding a little bit more backwards. So I just wanted to know if you had seen that. I don't know if I'm explaining it properly, but whereas you're being judged that you might be difficult.
I have, so the people I coach, I haven't heard the trend that it's backsliding, although, given the 300 years to gender equality, it's possible there's been backsliding in Canada.
I think COVID, I wonder if like that whole isolation and stuff, and where there was a break, and sort of like, I think it's hard to discriminate against people you have to work with every day, and you lost opportunities to make connections or build rapport in this time. So maybe that's part of it.
I think it's part of it. I think that women have told me that there's just something different. So with women with family, they're always the one to deal with a lot of different things with the family. So they're the ones on board. The husbands try to help, but it's just not the same. So I recommend Drop the Ball, which is, it's about getting and giving up. giving up that role a little bit. But it's a complex thing, and there's no easy answers to it. But I hear what you're saying, and in those cases, I think if my book explains it more, and I can't if I could throw out an easy answer, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If it were easy to change, we wouldn't be here 20 years later.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's not never going to be easy.
No, it isn't. And I think what it is for me, it's always about awareness. So if your firm or wherever you're working is espousing equality, then I think you've got to go to some influential people and say, and be very objective. Here is what is happening. I wanted you to be aware, because you espouse gender equality, this is what is happening. I want you to keep it confidential because of the way things are. So that's how there are no simple things. You may not feel comfortable doing that. I'm certainly not telling you to do that, but it is one way of calling it. And again, I would go through the exposed chapter and look at all the things to expose it. And sometimes it's clients questioning it. Like, if someone's off a file, why do you have no women on this file? Everyone's having children. Certainly that may be the case, but where are the women on these files? So having a third party question it is usually the best. It makes people sit up, but I think you really have to expose it. And what I don't want to have happen, and thank you for raising it, is people going, well, that's just the way it is.
And
if you stick your head up, then you're just going to get it, lopped off. It's a tall poppy. I'd hate to see that happening. So thank you for raising it. I hate to say, look at the book, but we can have a conversation later if you want, Joanna. I'm happy to talk with you more about this as to what you can specifically do given the factors in your organization. I'm passionate about this stuff, so I am willing to, help you out if you want to talk more about it with me.
Wow, well, thanks. And actually, I think you've kind of like hit the nail on the head. Like, I think that would be the solution, and actually going to, another party and calling it out, because everybody is espousing these values these days, and they're saying one thing and sort of doing another. And
sorry, go ahead, Joanna.
no, I was just going to say, I don't think I'm that brave, but I do think that I'm less vulnerable than other people. So, maybe it's my turn to try and fix this a little bit,
Absolutely.
Joanna, I say, I think we all play a role. Sorry, Delee, because one example that comes to my mind, and I think I am very much aware of these issues, but a bias or a gender blind spot that I had when I had left the law practice program. We were looking to who would take my position, and the most qualified candidate was just leaving, or was on parental leave. She had just had 2 children, and she was the most qualified candidate. And my mind went to, oh, well, do we need somebody to fill it? We need somebody right now. My boss at the time, who is a male, I said, hang on, if she is, let's work around, how can we actually resolve this? If she is the most qualified candidate, let's do something for the year that she's going to be on her leave, and then she'll take the role on in a year. And I thought, of course, like it should be so simple, but I realized my own bias at the time. No, we needed something filled right now. Let's fix it this way. So it's always a work in progress, and that, we are always learning from it. So I appreciate that comment. I'm going to be the optimist and say, there might be some backsliding, but hopefully there's a, 1 foot backwards, 2 foot forwards, or whatever the saying is. So I appreciate that.
The other thing I've noticed is that the higher up you go, the more likely they're going to want to see an alignment between the values they're espousing and what's really happening. Like, the more successful people I've found have been the first to make an environment, like, so that other people can succeed. So that's a trend too, right?
Yeah, that's a good trend.
Yeah.
Rosa, thank you, Joanna. We're going to go to Rosa and then to Sandra. So Rosa, over to you. Where'd you go?
Sorry, I'm here. I was just
There we go.
trying to unmute. Apologies for not going on video. It's my dogs are jumping around everywhere. So, get two Jack Russells. So on the heels of what Joanna was commenting and the feedback about raising it and basically being the whistleblower in an environment. I think like I've heard doing the opposite because the comments that you see in various different publications, like HR is not your friend. You risk there being subtle retaliation by leveraging the fact that the law allows environments to terminate for convenience. They don't need to give you a reason. And things like that employers have learned to work around. And so I would add to the raise the issue, but know your environment before you do, because it can have the opposite impact. And so I just wanted to flag from that perspective as well, because if you're feeling it, likelihood is that there are pockets in your environment that are not as safe as they might seem.
For sure. And I think you've got to be political. You've got to be political. And if you can build up a power of alliances, if you can get people that are also have the same view, and there's enough of you, they have to listen. So I agree with you in terms of being the lone wolf. It may not be the best way to go unless you have the ear of influential others, unless you know that you aren't vulnerable and that these influential others will listen. But again, the power of alliances is there's enough of you, they have to listen to you, and it's fairly difficult to fire multiples as opposed to a single person. So I think that might address a little bit. Every situation is different, but I agree with you on that, Rosa. You have to be careful if you're a lone wolf, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Sandra, you've had your hand up. Welcome to this book club.
Oh, what a wonderful discussion, and what a wonderful book, Delee. Really, I've read a lot of practice management books. I'm actually a practice management coach, and this I'm going to recommend highly to everybody.
Well, thank you. Thank you. There's a workbook that goes with it that I did with Rocca Morra Hodge at Rotman. So she was also doing the coaching and liked it so much. So there's a workbook just to tell you about that, because that's very hands-on as well. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, that's great to know.
Not always selling. In fact, I sell them sell. So
thank you. That's great to know.
We're all about promoting. Remember that. Sorry. So there we go. Go ahead, Sandra.
Right. Good one, Gina. Okay, so I love that you're addressing some of these questions with that point about expose it, because these problems are so, I don't know, legacy. They really are age-old problems at this stage. And I have run into, so I'm a coach now, but in my previous jobs, I have run into aggression from women. And, and I do think it's the tall poppy syndrome. They were threatened by me. But I wanted to share how I actually ended that, because it is about the exposing, and I'm understanding it on a different level now by listening to these stories. So it was a role where, I had a senior management position. My boss was a woman, and one of my colleagues was also a woman who was aligned with my boss. So the two of them made my life very difficult. And I would just, ask for the best projects. I would ask for the ones that I was interested in. I would ask for the resources to be successful. And I was denied. And I reached a point where I had it, because I decided I've been set up to fail here. And I know that I can do this. I had the skills to do the job well. So I wrote this long email, and I copied my allies. I copied the salespeople who had really become my allies. I copied the president who became my ally. And I was very factual about, here is the status of all of these programs that I was responsible for. Here's the reason why I am not going to be delivering on X dollars of sales. I'm marketing, but sales can't do anything without me. And it's because these resources were denied me. This was denied me. This was denied me. And I sent that email and my life changed after that email. Never to go back.
Mm.
I'm serious. And that took the most courage I have ever had to bring to my job. But my life changed in that moment.
Well, that's very brave of you, and that's wonderful you did it. So you used the power of alliance. You were very political. I mean, you had some pretty influential people that were your, your allies. So that is wonderful. That, I mean, you've done exactly what I would advocate you're doing in that situation. So good for you. Good that you did that. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'm sharing it here because that was a very hard battle for me. And, there are little nuggets in there that maybe others can learn from.
No, I think it's really important. And Sandra, I just wonder if there's one example of how your life changed for the positive. If there's something you can give sort of as a, well, what was the difference after you sent that note and then is there something that you were able to share? And if you want to, that's great. If not, I'll respecting that as well.
Well, I would say, the small changes that happen every day was a big thing. And that was, I was no longer being belittled. My power position had changed without my job being changed. So the women who would be stealing credit, literally taking my name off of documents, like,
wow.
and changing words and making it worse than it was when I wrote it. So that stopped because, I was like, everybody knows who I am now. You can't do that anymore.
You called it out. You called it out and then credit got taken. That's great.
I got the backing I needed on my programs because now you can't pretend that you're not doing the sabotage anymore. Now it's exposed.
Yeah.
It's impossible to pretend.
Good for you. Good for you. I appreciate that.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And it's wonderful that it changed so immediately for you as well.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And appreciating the courage that it took to do that as well. All right, because that would not have been an easy feat to do. I'm always trying to be respectful of people's time. Do we have any final comment or question before we wrap up? We're at 8:27 according to my clock. Any other comments or questions before we wrap up? Okay. Seeing as there aren't
a big
any...
thank you to both of you. Gina, you've also been a leader for me from the time I'd applied to a law school, a good example. And that was when I think you were in charge of admissions. That was a really long time ago. And Delee, again, thanks for the impression. And I keep learning and getting better from hearing from all of you and the experiences. And it's also very brave of you to do that book, I think, Delee, and put it all out there for us. So
Absolutely.
No bravery involved, but thank you so much. You guys you're on the front lines. I'm just at the back shouting instructions.
Well, it's definitely important to share that information. Before I thank Delee, I just wanted to remind people that these conversations, we want them to continue. And the next one, I thank the group who are responding as registrants, because a couple of people said we need to talk about money. In career, money is never talked about. We talk about it in terms of salary negotiations, that 1.5 million is there, but in terms of thinking about finances and how that can help move us forward. Our next author, Erica Alini, will be with us in April about that comment about personal finance. And she's a Globe and Mail journalist who has written on this topic in particular, and I'm really looking forward to that conversation. But in the meantime, today has really been fascinating for me. When I thought about March and it being International Women's Month, I thought, well, what book can we talk about, or who should I be looking at? And Delee, when you and I first connected, I was so grateful that March worked out for both of us to be able to have this particular book for this particular month. But it's a book that has to be on our radar, on our agenda for the full year, not just 1 month or one evening. So a really huge thank you, Delee, to you for joining us. To everybody, thank you so much. Delee, any final comments before we wrap up?
No, thank you for having me. I'm always so pleased to be talking about this material, and thank you for your questions. Those were excellent questions, and thank you for sharing. You know, again, the power of alliances. We're far stronger together than we are on our own. So that was marvelous. So thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it. Have yourselves a very good evening, and until next month, have a great month, and we'll talk again next month. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Bye
Good
now.
night.
Bye. I'm gonna stop the recording.